a safe place. This is a safe place. Don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed. There's still hope here. There's still hope here.
Thank you, guys. This is a subject that most people don't want to talk about, and so we should, right? We should talk about it. And shame. Shame. Let's talk about shame. I kind of learned about shame at seminary. We took lots of classes in it. Inflicting shame, making people feel bad about themselves, using the Bible to, destroy God's image in mankind. That was a 4-part class. Not really. But the church has quite a reputation, right, for adding a lot of weight to the way we feel about ourselves, a lot of guilt and shame. And I want to unpack this idea of shame just because over the last 6 or 8 weeks, I have experienced so many people who seem to be in its grip. And the amazing thing is, as I did some work over the last few weeks, understanding what the culture is saying about shame, here's the amazing thing. What I've realized is that everybody's talking about this. On the back of your notes is the name of a woman who is absolutely brilliant, and I would, so for more information and to kind of take this further, you have to, if you haven't discovered Brené Brown yet, you have to. TED Talk, TED Talks, and just Google her, and you will, reading her book right now, it's just brilliant information. Here's what I love about Brené Brown. She is a sociological psychologist and a researcher. And what she has done is she has 14 years, I think, spent 14 years understanding how shame and vulnerability work on the human heart. And so what she does with data is back up what I have found to be true from the scriptures and other places. I just love that. It's like, bam, thank you. Now, the way we have been kind of brought up in church and maybe in your family, I don't know if you came from a healthy family and there was, shame isn't an issue from you. That's beautiful. If you have been able to process things, I'm so grateful for that. But I have a little bit. And I want to understand it. So let's do that together. First of all, let me define it for you. And let me differentiate it a little bit as well. And then we're going to look in some scripture about it. I love, first of all, what Carl Jung said about shame. He called it, and Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, pretty smart guy, and in his experience, he calls shame a soul-eating emotion. It's like tooth decay in your heart. What is it? Shame is an intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are deeply flawed. Beyond that. And because of that, we're unworthy of love and belonging. We're beyond hope, and that we've got to hide who we really are to have any chance of connection at all. It's a sense of smallness, less than. Shame is highly correlated to these behaviors and ideas, according to Brené Brown, who has done the work. Addictions, depression, violence, aggressive behavior, suicide, eating disorders, and bullying. Shame is, if not at the core, correlated with it closely. The more shame you feel, the more likelihood that you will participate or be a part of some of these ideas. Now, here's the interesting thing. Guilt has exactly the opposite correlation. Experiencing and feeling healthy guilt has an inverse relationship to those same behaviors. So in other words, guilt is okay as long as it's appropriate and healthy. It actually is helpful. But when we let guilt kind of spill into shame, we're in peril. So I want us to understand those distinctions just a little bit more. So let me just unpack this with you. Guilt is a focus on my behavior as the issue. Shame is a focus on me as the issue. Does that make sense? Guilt says, I'm sorry. And this is healthy, right? I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Shame says, I'm sorry, I am a mistake. Guilt carries a fear of having my crime uncovered. I hope Mom doesn't find out I had a cookie. Shame carries the fear that I will be uncovered. I hope Mom doesn't find out that I'm the kind of person who steals cookies. See the difference? Now, these distinctions, I'm doing my best in the time that we have allotted to kind of unpack these distinctions. We need to say more about this, but we don't have the time to this morning. What I want to do is help you understand that shame, in nearly every form, is a negative and draining idea in your life. I want us to understand that shame is a value judgment as to who you are, not what you do. You with me? Okay. So, how does this happen? How does someone begin to kind of become shamed? Maybe you heard some things like this when you're growing up. I don't know. Let's go back to that. Let's find someone other than us to blame. You may have heard this. You are a bad boy. You are a bad girl. What kind of person would say something like that? Or do something like that? Maybe you overheard this. I just don't know what I'm going to do with that kid. Maybe you said that. This is a good one. Have you ever gotten a look of disgust, just a look of disgust and then a look away from a loved one? It's a powerful message. What does it say? You are bad. Now, the church hasn't done a lot of helpful work with the idea of original sin. We can't go there right now, but we can at some point. Orthodoxy doesn't include that idea, by the way. You know what else will cause shame and kind of seed it deeply within us is a desertion or an abandonment from someone who should not have deserted or abandoned. Because what do we think when, we don't think this consciously, but when a father or a mother or someone close to you leaves, what do you think? If I was just a better, fill it in. Now, I'm not saying that's healthy thinking. So how do we move from, and I don't know to what degree that this is an issue for you, but how do we move from wherever you are with this idea of shame to kind of I love, and I'm just like addicted to Brené Brown now, but I just love the way she thinks. She uses the term wholeheartedness. I love that. How do we move toward wholeheartedness, wholeness? I mean, that's why Jesus showed up. To create wholeness in the heart of humanity, to restore. Well, I want to talk about 3 stories from the Newer Testament, and we'll probably just have time to look at 2 that you may be familiar with, and one that you're not, and I'm not going to take the time to look at all 3, but the passages are typed into your notes. So first of all, I want us to understand something in a powerful way that I call the voice that Jesus heard in his head. Now, I want to read to you the story of the temptation of Christ in the wilderness. And there's a lot of ways to look at this passage. There's a literal way where there is an actual devil speaking to Jesus, and that's That's certainly a good and worthy interpretation. But I'm going to take a little bit of a different kind of a run at it today, with your grace, and just say, okay, let's look at this as Jesus hearing a voice inside of his head. Now, let me ask you this question. What is the voice inside of your head, the one that kind of makes you feel less than? What does it sound like to you? Is it an accuser? Mine is. Anybody else have an accuser in their head? Yeah, thank you. You know, vulnerability is a real big piece of this. Listen to this passage. Matthew chapter 4. Jesus has just come out of his baptism, and then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert to be tempted by the devil. Now, the devil, that word in Greek, you know what that word means? You know what that word is? It's the what? The accuser. Diablos. The accuser. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." And there are two others. So, what does Jesus hear? Accusations. You know, if you were really the Son of God, I mean, who do you think you're kidding? You know, one of these days, everybody's going to understand and find out who you really are. The whole sham is going to be up, pal. What do you think? Really? You know, if you're really who you say you are, then do what? Prove it. Prove it in three ways. These are the three temptations. Make these stones bread. Throw yourself down from the highest point of the temple, and angels should catch you if you're really who you say you are. And then the third one, worship me, and I'll give you all of the kingdoms of the world. Ultimate, you'll have everything you've ever dreamed of. Three temptations. Productivity. If you really were who you say you were, you'd be more productive. You know what? I can't believe you don't get more done around here. I just can't understand how you could live all day long and not get more. I mean, what's done on your to-do list? Have you ever heard that inside your head? Oh my gosh. Productivity. If you really were who you say you were, you would do something practical. Make these stones into bread. I mean, you're hungry. Protection. If you really were who you said you were, your life would be a lot easier than this. If you could throw yourself down from the temple and angels would catch you, you would be protected. And so my voice sometimes says these things like, you know, if you really love God as much as you thought, don't you think He would take better care of you? I mean, how could this tragedy happen or that tragedy? Or, I mean, who is this God anyway? And then the third one, power. If you really are who you say you are, you should have all the power you'll ever need. Jesus heard these voices. Now, the beauty of the Christ in Him. This is the most beautiful takeaway from Matthew 4 that I've ever experienced. Matthew chapter 4, the devil says, you are less than, you are less than, you are less than. And if you're not, then prove it. And Jesus answers back, I am not less than, I am who I say I am, and I don't have to prove it because I know it's true. Oh. That would certainly be a beautiful way to live. The voice is inside of our head. I picked up, and I don't want to say I was taught because that places blame. I picked up early that if I want to be liked, there were certain things I had to do. Right? In my life, it wasn't, funny, in my life it wasn't smart at school, it was good at sports. And so, I didn't spend a lot of time trying to be smart at school, but I did spend a lot of time being good at sports. what is it for you? What is it that... Now, here's the funny thing. We're so screwed up. And it's beautiful, and it's okay. See, this is the thing. We'll get through it, and we'll understand more about it and unpack it, and things will begin to make sense. Here's the funny thing about my paradigm for living. I need to exercise now, and I'm not exercising. But I exercised my whole life. What I realized this week, 51, 52, the only reason I really exercised was so I'd be better at basketball. Now, I was better at basketball because it got me approval. And it got me passes from things like assignments at school. Yes, it did. So the reason I love basketball, now I love it for the game itself, don't get me wrong, but there's a part of me that loves it because I was better than a lot of other people at it. And so I exercised to play basketball and to excel. I would lift weights, I would train, it was beautiful when I played basketball. I felt beautiful when I played basketball. Now, fast forward through 4 knee surgeries where each one they take out cartilage, and now I can't play basketball anymore because there's no cartilage in my knees. So guess what I stopped doing? Exercising. Why? Because the only reason you exercise is to be a better basketball player. You can't play basketball, you won't exercise. See how that works? Now, what good thinking, right? This is what I mean by understanding how we operate, and shame is at the core of a lot of it. What I did was I played so that I didn't feel shame. And there's a lot of tentacles wrapped around that. Now, Luke 15, this is a great story, and you know it. We just spent several weeks in it. So it's the story of the prodigal son. Luke 15, so this is, the first one is the story the verses Jesus heard in his head. This one is the voices that you hear in a family. I love my family. My family of origin, my current family. I love the idea that it's going to get bigger and expand. I just love that idea. But there's not always the healthiest voices in families. There are 3 voices in this family in Luke chapter 15, the family of the prodigal. There's the voice of the runaway, there's the voice of the father, and then there's the voice, I forgot to get myself a glass of water. Would someone just grab me a glass of water, please? Anybody? You'll go right to heaven. Thank you, Judy. That's Ron Levetry's line, by the way. Now, Jesus told him this parable. Suppose one of you, pardon me, that's the wrong one. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. And then you know the story. The younger son leaves home, spends all of his money, ends up in a pigsty, and then comes to his senses, right? Now, what this son has done is squandered 1/3 of his family's estate. And now he's starving, and so he goes home. Listen to what he says about himself. When he came to his senses, Judy, thank you so much, dear. Thank you. When he came to his senses, he said to himself, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I'll set out and go back to my father, and this is what I'll say to him. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. That's guilt. But what's the next phrase? I am no longer worthy to be called your son. That's shame. So just make me like one of your, just hire me so I can at least not die. So he leaves. So while he was still a long way off, coming on his way home, his father saw him, was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to his father, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he is found. What's the voice of the father say? What you did was stupid. I get it. You're forgiven. And right then, he could have inflicted a very deep wound, right? Oh! So look who comes climbing back now. You don't have any money left, do you? How many times is this going to happen? You know what the guys are saying about me downtown? I can't even show my face. But what does the father do? Oh. Yes, he does, man. And significantly, puts the best robe on him. Whose robe in that house is the best robe? Father's. What does the ring mean? Signet ring, family ring. Sonship is restored. Guilt is good. It's okay. I feel guilty because I did something wrong. Okay. It makes me want to make amends. But when that guilt spills into shame and goes deep into my heart, it's like a poison. That father did not inflict any of it. And wouldn't hear of the son kind of inflicting it on himself. Now, let's go to the voice of the older brother. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and asked him, What's going on? Well, your brother has come back. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you killed a fatted calf for him. Now, what's the second son doing? He's saying, not only is my brother worthless, but you're a horrible father. It's amazing. And the father says, what? Don't you talk to me like that! I mean, that's the most natural thing to do. You see how this could all have gone really wrong? The father says this, Son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead, and now he's alive again. That is a father. Now, I don't know what the conversations were like between the two sons, but they weren't good. That's the end of the story that Jesus tells. You see where shame can be inflicted subtly or not so subtly. Mark chapter 5, read that one later. This is a story about the lock and chain people, and I just love the story, but we're not going to unpack it today. So how do we begin to make a movement towards the beauty of the wholehearted life, toward wholeness? How do we begin to kind of excise some of the shame that's poisoning us from the inside out? I think that's a good question. And I want you to hear me say that this is not the only thing you need to know in order for that to happen, right? This is not a small issue. This is just the beginning. So stay with me here for just a few minutes. And these aren't like, listen, if you Google later today, if you Google living without shame, you'll find 300 websites, and each one have 4 easy steps, or 12 easy steps, or 7 easy steps. And there's a lot of good information, but none of these steps are easy. Now, they're easier than living with shame for the rest of your life. But this is work. So let me show you what I mean. Number one, and these ideas all come from these 3 stories. Number one, notice what brings on the feeling of shame for you. Notice what brings it on. And this is how you know what brings it on. Susie knows. Susie and I have been working together for long enough, close enough, so that she knows what brings it on for me, because she'll hear me say things like, Everly, And it's funny, so it's like a joke. But in my mind, this is what brings it on. I'll go, sorry, but goes on in my mind. Idiot. You ever say that to yourself? Like Chris Farley? Stupid, stupid. I hear that voice, and I used to believe it. What brings it up for me is this. Almost all of it surrounds forgetfulness. Almost all of it. When I forget to do something, or forget to keep a commitment, don't keep a commitment, or forget where I put something, almost all of it comes from forgetfulness, and almost all of that comes from my ADD. Almost all of it. It's been part of my framing story for as long as I can remember. So that's what a lot of it is for me. But what I want you to do is just begin listening to the voice. Shame is a conditioned response. What is a conditioned response? Conditioned response is what Pavlov taught us, right? You've got a dog, he sees food and he salivates. You have a dog who sees a bell and he doesn't salivate. But if you take that dog and when you put food in front of him and ring a bell, what will eventually happen? That dog will hear the bell and not see any food and he will salivate. So shame is a conditioned response as well. When I felt so much shame for so long about forgetting things and what kind of led up to that and what that did, that anytime I forget something now, even if it's not, none of it's shameful. I could forget where I put a glass of water when I'm walking around the backyard doing yard work. And I'll get that same silly feeling. Like, it's no big deal. Who cares if I never see the glass again, right? Dude, relax. But that conditioned response, how could you not remember where you put that glass? The voice is right there. And now I go, oh, I remember you. You're not allowed in here anymore, bro. Simply listen to yourself. Take note of what the patterns are like, that's all. That's the first thing to do. Just listen. Number 2, talk to yourself like you would talk to someone that you love. I have to tell you that as honest as I can be, I would never look at another human being in my life and say, stupid, you're just stupid. I would never. I can't imagine. Why would I do it? What? So just back off and talk to yourself like you would talk to someone that you love. You lost the glass, whack job. What's the big deal? Who cares? Go get another glass. You bought them in the first place. They're your glasses. Lose them all if you want to. Right? It's okay. Losing a glass is no big deal. Forgetting where you put something, it's okay. And if it is a big deal, you make amends and you move on because that's what happens. That's how life works. Introduce a new voice. Talk nice to yourself. Number 3, reach out to someone you trust and tell them your story. That story. I'm feeling shame about this, and I want to talk to you about it. You know why? You know why we have to do that? Because as soon as you bring something out into the light like that, it will shrivel and begin to die, like a vampire. Think of shame like vampires. You know what the fuel for shame is? Secrecy, silence, and judgment. A lot of different recovery communities use this phrase. We're only as healthy or as sick as our what? Secrets. It's an amazing thing. Now, James chapter 5, James, this beautiful writer in the New Testament, says this: confess your faults one to another so that you will begin to heal. Now here's how we got this just a little bit off. In some religious traditions, and I don't mean any offense if this is your religious tradition. I grew up in a religious tradition where you would go and you would actually confess to an official, a priest from that from the church, and you would, and it was quite a big deal. And what I realized, what it taught me, and this is just my experience. What my experience taught me was this: I get to tell this guy who I really am, which makes me not want to go back to that place anymore, by the way. But all of these people that I live with every day, I don't have to tell them anything. The job there is to hide in secret. You're so bad, you have to take this to a religious official, because anybody else would just... And then I would think some days the priest would go, "Are you kidding me?" Thankfully, they never did. See, what the emphasis in the Scriptures is it's not that it's wrong confessing to someone like that. It's, no, share yourself, even your secrets, with people who love you and you trust, and live in that community. That's what we mean when we say this is a safe place or that's a safe place. Imagine having friends like that. I love this last one. And again, this is just a start. Begin to think about your past mistakes as productive outs. You know what a productive out is? My wife has taught me this. My wife is the biggest Giants fan I know. And I'm a Giants fan because I'm a Lynn fan. But, you know, Kruk and Kipe, how do you not like these guys, right? And they'll say this. Someone will hit a ball. There'll be maybe somebody on first and second. And maybe the pitcher comes up, and he bunts the ball, and it gets thrown out at first base. And you go, nuts! And they'll go, oh, that was a great at-bat. Why? Because it was a productive out. What does that mean? It advanced the runners. You can think of your past mistakes as just proof that you are not enough, or you can look at them as productive outs and say, you know what? I'm going to use my past mistakes to advance the runners in my life. In other words, I'm going to learn from them. There are some things you cannot learn or become without the eventualities of life. And that includes doing stupid things, hurtful things. Now, I'm not saying those are good things, but they're there. Let the power out of them. Learn from them and move through them. That's what it means to be wholehearted, at least in a sense. The inverse of shame is a sense of worthiness. It's hard for me to say this because unworthiness is so ingrained in me. It's funny. I didn't know how much unworthiness was ingrained in me until I began to type the end of this sermon. It's funny. Worthy. What does that mean? You are worthy to be loved. You deserve love. If that doesn't sit well, like it didn't with me, it's because some adjustment needs to be made. The inverse of shame is a sense of worthiness. Worthiness allows you to feel a strong sense of love and belonging. We begin to believe that we are worthy of love and belonging. If you're a person who can't believe anyone could possibly love you, this may be one of the big issues. I have to tell you this. I wish someone would have told me this a long time ago. I love the title of Brené Brown's book, Daring Greatly, it's called, and she takes it from the Teddy Roosevelt quote, remember it? It's not the critic who counts. not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled or how the doer of deeds could have done them better, but it's the one who's in the arena. See, that's us. Whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who fails daringly, who errs and comes up short again and again, but who does so while daring to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, who at best will know the glorious sense of high achievement, and who at worst will suffer from failing over and over, but whose place will never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. We need to start with our children. We need to start with ourselves, and then allow this to seep into the lives of our children and everyone around us. I think this is at the root of a lot of stuff, and I have to thank this dear woman, Paris Kennedy, who had this deep sense of shame, so deep that she allowed herself to be abused almost every day of her life by somebody. And I looked her in the eye time and time again and said, Paris, when you're ready, we can help, really help. And I didn't understand how deep this was. But I'm beginning to see. My friends, the life of following Jesus, the way of Jesus, is a life where we recover our hearts and we begin to move in wholeness in an amazing way, where we become sons and daughters of God. And that is my prayer. So God help us with this. We have so many stories that are running through our minds all of the time about who we are and about where we're not enough. And we move through and do so many things to prove and to prove and to prove. And each of those, Father, gets us into a deeper place. I pray that you would help us to work through this. I pray, God, that you would help us to listen to ourselves. Not only what we say to ourselves, but how we are and what we say to others. And I pray, God, that you would help us to banish this shame so that there's room for new veins of health to begin connecting to our heart. This is our hope. I pray that you would help the Quest, God, to be created into a safe place where people, in beautiful ways, create deep enough relationships so that they can be honest about themselves with other people, and thus let the power and the air, the mystery, out of their own shame. I pray, Father, you would begin to help us see ourselves like the father in the parable sees both of his sons. And help us to know, God, that that is the perfect example of you, and so it can also be a perfect example of us. I pray you would move us down this field, Father. And I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, my friends. Have a good day.